Now they're sort of talking that typically a B2B buying decision, sort of substance, can involve 20 different buying roles. And Tom did some research that supported this. So back then I started thinking, okay, they termed it the buying committee because they said that it's no longer about decision makers. It's no longer about executive buyers. There are people that get together to make buying decisions by consensus, because the people at the top layer are going to go, well, do you know what? I'm not going to put my name to a decision unless everyone's on board. I don't want to be the one that's accountable for a bad decision. I want to make sure everybody does, so that if we make an investment, everyone's going to say, well, it's part of that decision, so support it. So the buying committee was the roots of what started me along Boxtel. And that sort of morphed into multi-threading, because multi-threading has become a topic of conversation in the sales industry in the last 2 to 3 years. But what we do is we break it down in 3 ways. Firstly, what we call stakeholder relationship mapping. Being able to visualize who you know, what you know about them, what's the dynamics between them, what's important to them, how you can help them. And largely, it's one of the biggest reasons that people sort of fail is because there's gaps in what they know and what they need to know, and it's not easy to define in CRM. The second part is a term we probably come across quite frequently now, mutual action plans. So this is about, you've got the buying. Now, how do you help them in the process of deciding and buying? And that's what we have our own version of that called outcome enablement plans. And at the end of it, this group, this buying committee that people multi-threaded with, will make a decision. You've either won it, you've lost it, or they do nothing. That's where our tool enables you to get performance feedback, win-loss analysis feedback from everybody or select members of the buying committee for each deal. And multi-threading, or this who's involved in the buying committee, is the foundational piece, because you can't enable your customers in the concept of buyer enablement unless you know and understand them. And that's why we sort of focus heavily on multi-threading.
Yeah. Taking a step back, I guess, if for those of, there may be some, junior SDRs or new salespeople listen to this pod, like taking a step back, you mentioned it's a fairly new term in the last couple of years. It's getting a lot of hype. What is multi-threading in its essence?
It's the process of identifying, engaging, and understanding the wider buying group to facilitate a favourable change decision in your favour. So you can see what I mean by it's a mouthful. So in simple terms, it's like working out who's involved, finding out who they are, having some good communication with them, building some rapport with them, and then trying to influence them to make a decision where they go, you've got the deal. I look at multi-threading as what I call buyer discovery. How do we discover who's involved? How do we then engage with them? And then how do we understand what's important to them? Sales cycles have got longer and more no decisions. Win rates are down. That's what's impacting pretty much everybody in there. And largely because of the growing number of people involved in the decision. We are the problem that we're trying to overcome, because what it's like, the more people involved, the less likely you're going to get consensus, alignment, and agreement. And multi-threading is our way today of trying to sort of iron out some of the creases that we face in our sales engagement, of having to manage lots of different people.
So we recently ran a poll on LinkedIn, and we established that we asked our audience if they use multi-threading, and essentially 53% of our audience said no. So I was trying to work out, is that because they just genuinely don't use multi-threading because they don't know how to use multi-threading, or is it because they actually don't know what multi-threading is?
Salespeople have this. We easily find comfort if we get a good relationship with one person that we think has some sort of power or authority. We think our job's done. This person's going to rally the cause and be our champion, and they're of significant enough authority that they'll make us win it. That was something in the past that happened. The thing about selling nowadays, it's become a lot more complicated, a lot more hard work. When you have to engage, you've pretty much got to duplicate the efforts across so many different people. And here's a starting point. And I think it depends on what you sell. there are two types of sales: transactional or complex, stroke enterprise. Transactional might be something you sell with a pretty short close period. You might not have to engage with too many people. And sometimes when you single or double thread those, that's fine because there's less people involved in the decision. But even if, our platform, we could sell a deal and it might only be 2, 3, 4, 5K, and there'll be between 5 and 10 people involved. Not all of them are decision maker stakeholders. There'll be a bunch of users. One of the things I say to people, sales leaders, business leaders, I say, first and foremost, do you know what your ideal decision making team is? And they say, well, what does that mean? And say, well, when you win the deals, do you ever go and try and say, okay, let's talk this through. Who contributed to the yes for us to get the deal? Or even if they said no, who was involved in that decision-making process? Then start to build a list of all of them as functional personas, whatever roles they take. And you start to build a picture. Now what tends to happen, if you want to have a multi-threading strategy, you've almost got like a tick list. You're saying, right, typically for this deal, I know there's 6, 7, 8, 9 different functional personas that I need to identify and engage with. And that's when you start to get higher win rates and faster close velocity because you proactively brought these people in. And, if you sort of reach out to say people that I've seen the question all the time, you've got to ask who else is going to be involved in the decision. Please don't do that. You can do it, but you're probably not going to get a great answer because they're going to say, well, let's just leave it as us at the moment. We'll involve those people when necessary, blah, 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 blah. People sort of ring fence a lot of stuff and they try and control the deal. They try and control your ability to open up doors with higher stakeholders. You don't want to do that. You really need to say, well, look, that's great. However, when we typically sell these deals, we know that the CRM manager is going to be involved. We know VP of RevOps is going to be involved. We know that IT are going to be involved. Now, if we all steam ahead and then, when it comes to wanting to say yes, and then there's all these other people involved, it's just not going to happen. Wouldn't it make sense for us to engage for those? But that's why I tend to say to people, multi-thread from day one. The old adage, top down, middle out, bottom up. Literally hit everybody at the same time. Then you can't be saying, well, hold on, you tried to jump above me and that. You said, well, hold on, no, I engage with them at the same time as you. This is not something I'm doing to bypass you.
So can I get super tactical on that one? What you're saying is that when, for example, SDR, let's say, for example, you've got a cold account. When SDRs are doing their outreach, they need to be targeting the whole account from day one. What happens if, let's say, for example, one of the SDRs reaches a key contact and they book a meeting with that key contact? Does it undermine that relationship if the SDR then continues to prospect into that contact's colleagues? How do we make sure that there's kind of communication internally?
So you set a meeting with the senior contact. You go, okay, I want to reach out to more. It's great because you can go, when you reach out to these people, say, hey, James, just to let you know, I've got a meeting set up with Chris in 2 weeks today and things. Love you to be involved because I think it's relevant to what you do. Do you think that James is going to say no, knowing that Chris, if it's the senior person, is already meeting with us? Of course they're going to want to be involved. Half your job is done once you've got someone who's confirmed and said yes. If you can get multiple people, and if they say, actually, I can't make that day, you say, no problem. I'll tell you what, let's catch up afterwards and I'll give you a download of what James and I discussed. It is, selling now is as much about people management as it is opportunity management. Trying to get everybody on the same call or in the same room at the same time is difficult. But once you've got one person burned as a meeting, it creates almost like a domino effect when people say, there's a meeting. Okay, I don't want to, I need to be part of it.
I think one of the interesting things you said there, Kevin, is particularly when you've got a contact engaged, I think it's really important to have them as your sponsor. And yes, you don't want to undermine them, but I think, keep them updated, loop back to them, to your point, if you're having a good discovery session with someone, use them. Who else is involved in the decision? I'm really keen to have a conversation with you and your colleagues to find out what their challenges are, what pain points. Can you introduce me? Can you make that introduction and actually get them to be that sponsor while kind of obviously keeping them updated? Because I think one of the things some people struggle with is, I don't want to piss this person off by saying, your boss is involved, can you introduce me to them then? It kind of undermines them a little bit of, oh, you don't want my input. It's about position, I think.
Yeah, that thing is, that barrier or concern for sellers has been around forever. People think, guess what? Because back, as I mentioned, when I was a much younger salesperson, and we were thinking, okay, we've got this lieutenant we've engaged with, but we want to speak to the general, but at the same time, we don't want to piss off the lieutenant, think he's bypassing them. It's always been there. But that's why I sort of say, if you can, you can still go top down. People can say still top down, but it's much harder to get entry at the top because people, they don't want to take reach or calls or 15-minute demos or whatever it might be. So the more you multi-thread, the more likely it is, you're hedging. You're saying if you reach out to 10 people, you've got 10 times more chance of getting a meeting with someone than if you do it with one person. But the key thing to remember as well, for anyone that's sort of new to this element, is that do not have a vanilla approach. If you get a call with these different functional personas, make the call focused around what would be important to them. Because now a challenge might be a challenge that is company-wide, but when you're talking to an individual buyer, understand the challenges of change for them. Blah, blah, blah. Focusing on everyone as an individual. And that's one of the things we do in BoxStep is, you build a profile of what's important to each person. What are the challenges they face? What are the criteria of decision making that's most important to them? What are their concerns associated with making this decision? The more you understand that, the more you sort of build your jigsaw puzzle.
Is there anything you found works really well?
So what you're saying is that I've got an established contact with someone within the buying group, and how do I then create more introductions between them? Well, you'd hope they know they're working with the same person. Yeah, but it's bringing them together for sort of common thinking is always the difficulty, because one of the things you find is that politics is prevalent in pretty much every account. Can't get away from it. And some people are looking to do something that, garners them more power or is better for their organization, their part of the organization, their division, benefits them, whatever. And sometimes that's when it gets really difficult. Even when you've got two stakeholders that might be in conflict, there is a point that they can both benefit somehow hopefully through your proposition. So trying to bring those two people away from what they're conflicted about towards what benefit you can deliver both of them as stakeholders. That's one of the reasons that I think the stats vary now, that somewhere between sort of 50 and 70% of deals are no decisions, where the customer does nothing. I haven't seen that so much in my sector, but I know it happens in a lot because some of it's did they ever qualify the deal properly, but a lot of it is that people can't be aligned. So the more you can try and bring people together around by focusing on the common challenge they have away from their individual challenge and concerns for their departments, the better. And it is complex, but there's a lot of work involved in the longer the sales cycle, the more you're constantly got to be thinking about communicating with people more. Because the key thing to remember is 20% of stakeholders leave every year in every 12-month period. So if you've got a long sales cycle and enterprise deals can be 12 to 18 months plus, there's a good chance that a couple of those people that you engage with will be gone. You've got to, so that's why there was a term, I think it was coined probably 12, 13 years ago, sell high, wide and deep. That's what you got to do. So trying to understand that, not the level of authority, because influence is more powerful than authority today, but the level of influence. And then, these are the people you monitor closely and communicate with, but then right down to others that you still need to keep, your hand in with them. Complex enterprise sales is you have to be incredibly organized. And there's no way of getting away from it. There's a lot of admin involved because the more information you gather, the more you've got to organize it in a way that you're reviewing. Because if you've got a sales strategy, 6, 9, 12, 18 months, putting it all in, so constantly reviewing it, and selling's a team sport, so you're working with colleagues, etc., collectively in a way that you can review this information and adjust your strategy mid-sale. There is no, multi-threading has added to our workload significantly. You can't get away from it.
Do you think, I'm just going to go back to the tactical question again, because we spoke about SDRs simultaneously reaching out to contacts, and then we spoke about the fact that when the SDR books a meeting, you can actually use that meeting as leverage to try to engage with other contacts by referencing that meeting. What happens a little bit further down the cycle? Let's say, for example, SDRs passed that opportunity to an AE. The AE is now going through discovery and is starting to pitch, starting to share commercials. Is it okay at that point for the AE or the SDR who's maybe working with the AE to continue approaching other contacts without permission of the buyer? Or do you think that they need to involve the buyer as part of that outreach? What would you say best?
This whole sort of SDR AE thing still sort of does my head in, fries my head in, because you'll start saying SDR, prospecting today is the hardest part. The fact is everyone is challenged by pipeline. So the sales leadership says, let's do more prospecting, do more prospecting. The problem is we need better mid to bottom funnel management. And that's really about the point you were talking about. So the AE comes in at this point, but doing discovery when the AE comes on board. It sounds a bit alien because, discovery is to get a meeting, you've got to do an element of discovery, because otherwise if you're going to reach out to people, especially someone senior to get that first meeting, there has to be an element of discovery. It's a constant cycle. Going back to your question though, James, it's a constant cycle. What I would hope is that if you've got 2, 3, 4 contacts and the AE is involved doing more discovery, the question is can we do more outreach to a wider group? Yes. And there's different ways to put it. If by that point you've got an advocate, you've got a champion, then they'll proactively give you people to reach out to. If you haven't got anyone that, is your supporter and helpful at that point, then if you do nothing, it's likely you'll just end up treading water, not really progressing very far, because ultimately these other people will have to get involved for a deal to be signed off, because that's the way that deals are signed off now. What
you're saying is what you're saying, Kevin, is try to build advocacy first, because if you can build relationships first, then you're more likely to get those introductions into the wider buying committee.
You can, but advocacy takes time. Trust takes time. We don't always have time. If you're being pushed to move the deal forward, it's a classic, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Are you potentially going to piss some people off if you reach out to others? Possibly. Are you likely to stagnate in deal progress if you don't? Definitely. So for me, I'd say I'd rather piss 1 or 2 people off than for the deal just to die a natural death, because guess what? I didn't manage all the stakeholders. So if you've sown that seed, you don't have to be explicit of who you reached out to and how many of people, but at least they know that you're reaching out to their other colleagues. And the reason I'm reaching out is because we know that the touch points of what we sell is quite broad. And we know that it's not just one part of your organization that's going to be impacted or is going to have an interest in what we do. Hence the reason, we're doing this. We're reaching out to a cross section of people within your organization. I think if you're honest about it, it's better than trying to just throw that curveball in later in the sales cycle.
Is there anything is there anything creative done by anyone? What's like the most creative approach to engaging with the full buying committee, either at the point where they're completely cold, or at the point where there is warmth in the relationship and that they are in the pipeline?
Creativity is a rare thing in sales now. The so-called visionaries of, there are so many different things that have been tried. In the past, back in the day, I tried loads of different things. I was probably ahead of the curve in terms of using video. And when I talk about video, I'm talking about recording it with a camcorder and sending it on a disc, not like we have today. So innovation is rare now because you've got this cycle of everybody trying all sorts of different things, using all sorts of different tech. But for me, nothing is better and more refreshing from the buyer's perspective than good quality information, resources. Now, that's innovative because guess what? Buyers don't expect you to give them something that helps them and not you. It's like, whoa, that's refreshing. I didn't expect that. So, if you want to send something, just an independent piece of information, and I mean truly independent. And that's the thing. Neutral is an alien thing for sellers. We struggle to be neutral. We can't help but put a little hook in about us, but something that sort of says, look, here's a little piece of interesting research or a little tool that an ROI tool. Now, ROI is one of those things that pisses me off because everyone seems to think that ROI is something you can send to somebody and they go, oh, look at this ROI here. We've got to meet with these people. It's going to pay for itself in 9 months. Now, there's not one seller do an ROI tool where they understand the internal costs. So if the internal costs aren't in that ROI, it isn't an ROI. But if you provide something of value, guess what? That door will open. So
what about Leeds United? What about tickets for Leeds United? Would that help?
Would that open my door? Yeah, of course it would. Depends if it's director's box. Yeah, that would definitely influence me. Of course. I mean, but you get a lot of people nowadays have got all sorts of compliance rules at the level of gifting.
Is there a specific way to actually measure the impact of multi-threading?
Measurement's always a difficult thing, but the only way to look at it is if you looked at today, if people can look, they've got these reports they can create in their CRM and say, okay, what's our win rate? What percentage of deals are we winning? How many contacts did we reach? What was the period from start to finish that it took us to close it? Then, if you then start a new measurement point of when you start multi-threading and start measuring the same time, what was our win rate for multi-threading? How long did it take us to win? How many people do we connect with? Then you can make a comparison. But it is about really running reports to measure how are you doing today and then how you do once you start to multi-thread. But the key thing as well is one of the things that we do is that post the sale, you can measure the impact you had on different functional buying personas. So, for example, if you won a deal or lost a deal, they can give you feedback on how you performed against different things that were important and the reasons that they give you for winning or losing. Then you can start to compare all sorts of things. And one of those that we measure is how well did we engage with your wider colleagues? So we measure that in our own tool. But if you want to measure the impact of multi-threading, just do measurements against how you do it today, how you do it today, win rates, number of people connected, time to close, valuable information like that. But there is no downside to multi-threading apart from the work involved for salespeople.
Brilliant. Yeah. Where can our listeners find you, Kevin?
I'm on LinkedIn. No surprise there. Nothing, it's the best place to be. Or if anyone ever wants to take a look at how we help teams multi-thread, I think they'll like what they see. Just contact me at kevin@boxstep.com, and that's BOXXSDEP.